Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and it's time to grab our fedoras and spacesuits because today we're going to be talking about detective sci-fi and space opera in the form of the Prefect Dreyfus Trilogy by Alastair Reynolds. Now, to be honest, I don't own a fedora, but I did once rent a spacesuit. So, if you're new to the channel name is Words in Time, but some people refer to it as Alastair Reynolds propaganda. So, I'm going to let you know up top that this is going to be a positive review, but I think this series will suit some readers more than others. So I'm going to give you some info on it and let you know what kind of readers I think might enjoy this series. So let's get into it by establishing what exactly is the Prefect Dreyfus Emergencies. This trilogy takes place within Alastair Reynolds' Revelation Space universe. So let's break this down. Reynolds started with Book 1 in the series Revelation Space. This was followed by a standalone prequel, Chasm City, and then Books 2 and 3 in the series Redemption Arc and Absolution Gap. Then, quite a few years later, a fourth book in the series was added called Inhibitor Phase. And so those 4 books in the series are known as the Inhibitor Sequence. Now, within this same universe, Reynolds wrote a sub-series, the Prefect Dreyfus Emergencies, and this is a prequel trilogy that started with a book that was originally titled The Prefect and then was later changed to Aurora Rising. This is book 1, and it was followed by books 2 and 3, Elysium Fire and Machine Vendetta. And on top of this, Reynolds has written a number of short stories and novellas, which were available in different collections until recently when they were all compiled into 2 complete volumes. So you might be thinking, okay, there's a lot going on here. Thanks, Jonathan, for all of that information, but it kind of sounds like I need to do a lot of homework before picking up these books. Well, the good news is this is actually a great place to start within the Revelation Space universe, and I say that for 2 reasons. One, it is a prequel series, so you're not going to get spoiled. The rest of the books are not going to get ruined if you decide to jump in with Aurora Rising. And secondly, it does hold up on its own. There are some little threads that might connect, maybe a little bit of foreshadowing here and there, but you don't need any prior knowledge or information, and reading this series is not going to ruin anything for you if you then decide to pick up the other Revelation Space books. You can definitely start with Revelation Space, but if you like the sound of this particular sub-series, you can choose to start with Aurora Rising. So, what is this series all about? Well, within this area of the galaxy, there are a number of habitats known as the Glitter Band. There are about 10,000 space habitats that make up the Glitter Band, and within them, the citizens of these habitats are able to vote on their laws constantly through something called abstraction. So there is a democracy, a majority vote that will decide on all of these laws. And there is an organization called the Panoply, which its main responsibility is to not necessarily enforce these rules. Each of the habitats are free to make their own rules, but the polling. It is responsible for ensuring that the polling is done safely, correctly. There are these things called polling cores, which they maintain and protect. And within this organization called Panoply, there are things called prefects. And field prefects will go out into the field, and they have responsibilities to travel around the Glitter Band and take care of things when things inevitably go wrong. So they are kind of like detectives in a way, space detectives. So a cool thing about this series is that it feels like a space opera in that we get to travel through space and visit these various habitats and planets and get to meet the weird and wonderful characters and political factions. There's lots of politicking, as well as lots of interesting futuristic technology. But then the series also combines that with a detective case for the book. There will be a murder, or something's gone missing, or something's gone wrong, and our main character, the Prefect Dreyfus, he is usually responsible for trying to figure out these mysteries, put the clues together, and often these cases tie into bigger and bigger things that have large-scale impact and stakes within this universe. So that's the setup for the series, and I've told you that I liked it, but just exactly how much did I like it? Well, the first book, Aurora Rising, I thought was phenomenal. I loved how creative it was, imaginative it was. It kind of has that Revelation Space, slightly gothic feel to it. It gets under your skin a little bit, but in sort of like a fun and intriguing way. I just love the technology and how clever Reynolds' storylines are. And I kind of got invested in the characters. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but I really got into the story, just had a lot of fun with it, and I'm always just amazed by the way that Reynolds can sort of conjure up things that don't exist now, but what sort of wild and wonderful things could exist hundreds or thousands of years into the future. And I thought it ended in a very satisfying way. I gave Aurora Rising a 9.5 out of 10. And a little added bonus feature of Aurora Rising is that I think it holds up pretty well as a standalone. So if you're kind of interested in trying this out, but you're like, I don't know if I want to commit to a trilogy, you can just read Aurora Rising, and whether you like it, hopefully you like it. But if you like it and just want to stop there, you can. If you don't like it, that's a shame, but you won't feel compelled to continue a trilogy that you're not enjoying because you don't have to. And if you do want to continue, which I think most of you will, great. There's 2 more great books. So getting into those great books, Elysium Fire, I really like this one as well, but I thought the plotting and just sort of like the sci-fi ideas were just a notch below Aurora Rising. I thought it was very good, but maybe not quite as great as Aurora Rising was for me. But at the end, it really won me over because there was this storyline that felt a little bit separate. And you know Reynolds is going to tie it together somehow, but you're just not sure how all the pieces are going to fall into place. And what a perfect puzzle it ended up being. I was very satisfied with the ending. So I gave Elysium Fire a 9 out of 10, just below Aurora Rising, but I really liked Elysium Fire as well. And then Machine Vendetta, which I just finished recently, the 3rd book, man, it kicks off with a bang. Some great action at the start, pulls you in, some big ideas, some great character moments, and the scale kind of increases. It feels like, okay, we're building to something kind of epic. Like, we still kind of have the detective elements, but that space opera is just getting grander and grander. And I love the ending to Machine Vendetta as well. I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. So I must be really being nitpicky to dock just a couple half points here and there from Reynolds. House of Suns is a 10, and these books are right up there with House of Suns. So very high on this trilogy. Might be one of my favorite trilogies. In fact, I know it is. I would say it is clearly a top 3 sci-fi trilogy for me. My favorite trilogies, I would say, are The Remembrance of Earth's Past by Cixin Liu, Jean Laflambeur by Hanu Ryanimi, and now The Prefect Dreyfus Emergencies by Alastair Reynolds. So I obviously loved the series, but let's break down some of the elements and try to find out whether I think you will love this series as well. So, if you are a plot-driven reader, I think there's a lot for you to enjoy here. I think it is mediumly paced, maybe medium to fast in terms of the pacing. I might compare it to something like The Expanse, where it is primarily dialogue-driven, but with some great moments of action interspersed in between. Probably doesn't read quite as quickly as The Expanse. There's a few more technical descriptions in Alastair Reynolds' writing, but it's not super duper hard sci-fi. I still think the pacing stays up as opposed to something like maybe Peter F. Hamilton, where those books get a little chunky, gets a little bogged down in the details. I find Alastair Reynolds to be very readable because I'm pulled into the story. There's some great plot ideas. The sort of the way things weave together, I think, is always really clever. I wonder what his process is, because the amount of reveals is just so entertaining and it's so clever. It's like, at what point did you know this was going to work? I'd really love to interview Reynolds maybe one day and ask him about his process. And I really like the way things come together in the end in almost every book of his. I think Absolution Gap is the only book of his where I didn't completely love the ending. Pretty much everything else, I'm like, yeah, he nailed it. He got it to where it needed to go in a way that I wasn't expecting, but I ended up enjoying. All right, moving on to character readers. If you are a character first reader, this wouldn't be the first series that I would recommend to you, but don't run away. I don't think that the character writing is a negative. There are characters that I liked here. There are relationships that I enjoyed. I feel like maybe some of them are a little bit tropey, but I do think they have some layers to them. And in other Reynolds books, he's known for kind of having sort of unlikable characters or morally grey characters. In this particular sub-series, I feel like there are some great antagonists that you love to hate, and the protagonists I feel like are flawed, but Reynolds makes you root for them, or at least I felt like I was rooting for them. I like these characters. I wanted to go on the journey with them. So I wouldn't say that the character writing was a negative, just a little bit tropey. Some of the dialogue can feel a little expositional, but overall, I enjoyed these characters and going on the journeys that they went with them. All right, next up, if you are attracted to a sci-fi book for its themes and concepts, you're an ideas-driven reader, I think there is a lot to sink your teeth into here as well. On a sort of more personal level, there's some really interesting themes to do with memory and identity, and that's something that Reynolds has explored in some of his other books, but I think it's present here in sort of like a new and fresh way, tackles it from some. Yeah, that's the one I was trying to say. From some fresh perspectives, and I found that rather thought provoking. And on a larger scale, there's some really cool things to do with technology and the way that plays into various political systems and societies. And I really enjoy this from both a social and scientific perspective. And that brings us to world building. If you love diving into a science fiction world, there aren't too many that I would recommend before the Revelation Space Universe. In terms of all of the history and the different political factions, the different planets and habitats, there's just so much to explore. It's no surprise that Reynolds has written so many novels and stories within this universe, and there's some really cool hard sci-fi stuff that he gets to explore within this universe. But then also, it's just really ripe for storytelling. There's just some really fun places to go, different dynamics between all of these factors at play, and I just have a good time every time I revisit the Revelation Space universe. And lastly, we have the Prose snobs. If you are someone that, as much as laser guns or rocket ships, enjoys the pen on the page, the craftsmanship of the writer, then I'm not here to convince you that Reynolds is the best writer of all time. I think his first book, his debut book, Revelation Space, was a tad dry. However, I do think he has improved a lot as a writer since then, and I have increasingly enjoyed his prose throughout the years. And I'm not going to compare him to a Ray Bradbury or a Dan Simmons, but I do want to share a line with you, the opening of Elysium Fire, just as an example to show you that on top of the hard sci-fi or the action scenes, that I think he is capable of writing passages that are good at evoking imagery or emotions. So let me know what you think. From a distance, it almost looked natural. A planet with a ring. A world of ochre and mustard clouds with nothing of the surface visible. A poisonous place, peevishly inimical to human habitation. One shriveled moon. 10 billion such worlds clotted the galaxy, useless to all but the most desperate of species and civilizations. So I don't know about you, but I read that and I thought, okay, Mr. Reynolds, tell me more. So in the end, I think this series will appeal to some sci-fi readers more than others, but I think almost everyone should give it a try. I loved it, and I hope you love it too. I think you can't go wrong starting with Revelation Space, but if something about this intrigues you, you want that combination of detective sci-fi with space opera, don't worry, don't put it off because you think it's not a good place to start. I think you definitely can start with Aurora Rising. So there you go, we solved the case of the Prefect Dreyfus Emergencies. All that's left for you to do is smash, or just gently click, the subscribe button, and if you're looking to get a promotion, check out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs, like Nima, Anu Eden, Half-Ogre, Sikawe, Samil, Colin, and Machine Vendetta's #1 fan, Bamsis. And you can find more sci-fi content over here.